Hello and welcome to Second Rate Film School. I'm Andrew Watson. Today we're going to be interviewing the star of Courage the Cowardly Dog, Courage himself, Marty Grabstein. Welcome to the show.
Hey, this is just a pleasure to be here with Andrew over here on another delightful Zoom call. I look forward to whatever we're going to be creating together. I'm sure it's going to be wonderful. I feel a lot of confidence, and your pedigree precedes you. How's that?
That's good to hear. So, diving right in, while doing research for this, I was actually really surprised to find out that you weren't the first voice of Courage. In the short The Chicken from Outer Space, Courage was actually voiced by Howard Huffman. So, when and how were you brought into the series, and how did Howard's performance shape your take on Courage?
Well, first of all, I think that was 1995. Do I got that right? Howard Huffman. And that was, it wasn't, I don't think Dilworth did it as a pilot for a series. It was a short film, animated feature that actually was nominated for an Academy Award, right? Unbelievable, actually. It's fantastic, right? And Courage in that, forget about like lines, there were barely sounds coming out of Courage. There weren't a lot of sounds at all coming out of him. They were like, like there were things. But if you watch that film, not only not words, but not really that many sounds. So at the end of the film, there was zero lines. And then you hear Howard Huffman go, "This couldn't happen to a dog." Just like that, pretty much in that deep kind of thing. And it was a little like Jackie Mason, like, I don't know if you're familiar with Jackie Mason, So I think in his mind at that early incarnation of it, Dilworth had a thought that he would be somehow this neurotic Jewish guy somehow. By the way, you're allowed to say Jew on popular culture. So you tell wherever you're airing this thing, the word Jew is an acceptable thing. All right. Anyway, I just wanted to make that clear. We're not doing any of that nonsense. You'll get rid of it anyway if you don't want to. That whole thing will probably be gotten rid of.
No, we'll leave it in.
But anyway, so, what happened is that I got a call from a friend of mine who actually I had fallen out of touch with. Risa Neuwirth was her name. Risa was actually John, turned out to be like John's assistant on the whole process. She was kind of there with him through so much of the creation of everything. And she kind of kept him screwed on, right? Because he was such a, I will say, John, I think that he's a genius. I don't like throwing that word around a lot, but I'll say John is certainly just a brilliant artist and very charming. But, he's like this. So Reese is very okay. Let's do this. You have to do this. The blood. I was going to say the blood and guts. What do you call it? There's a thing you call it. The nuts and bolts of things. That's not blood and guts. Anyway, so she called me. I had not spoken to her in almost 5 years, and she had called me and said that I thought of you because I think she saw my name in a newspaper at one point, because I was doing sketch comedy in the city. I think this is how it went down. And I was doing sketch comedy with a partner, and so she saw that I'm still in the business, and like right away it kicked in, and we hadn't spoken in maybe 5 or 6 years. And she said, Marty, I thought of you. I'm working for this guy, John Dilworth, who's creating this new animated series called Courage the Cowardly Dog. And he is looking for the voice of the lead character, Courage. And he's listened to what appears to be every voiceover artist in the city. He's heard over 200 or 300 voices. I forget the exact number, but like a couple of hundred voices that he'd heard. over a period of months and still could not make a decision. So at this point, I'm opening it up to what I can think. I'm thinking out of the box, and they reached out to me, and I had not done really voiceover work to speak of. And so she called me up, and she basically described what the character is. I mean, I didn't really think about it because I didn't know what he wanted. Neither did she, by the way. She couldn't even give me a hint as to how I should do it, because she no longer understood what he wanted. And may I add, probably he himself did not know what he wanted, probably at that point, or did not know it unless it bit him on the ass. If it bit him on the ass, then he would know. Like, that was probably what he was hoping for. And sure enough, I went into the event. I went into the thing, and ironically speaking, it's interesting. And actors, I was talking about the actor's ego. I was kind of walking into this, potentially very exciting thing, right? Lead character audition for a cartoon series, for Cartoon Network. Brought in by somebody from the inside who brought me in special. So she talked me up. So I got a wonderful, intro, so to speak. I had nothing to lose. And I felt strangely in a powerful position, which is what you should always feel like if you're an actor, and understand that you have something to offer the world. And even if they decide you're not quite right for that thing, or, it doesn't matter their opinion, you have something to offer. A lot of actors have trouble with that because there's such a high rejection rate that it's hard not to take it personally. But that being said, so I went in, and it was like right away I hit it off with John. We were joking around, and I was kind of doing like this, what do I do? What do I do? I'll save you, Muriel. And I was doing all that stuff. I just started doing it. I didn't think about it. I just started doing it. And he was laughing from it. And I'm thinking John was laughing, and I was thinking, something's going on here. There was like a level of excitement kind of that I could see in front of me. So I kept doing it. So John said, okay, can you do this stuff? He said, it sounds a little like Jackie Mason. He actually said that. Can you put it, like raise the timbre of it, the tone of it high, and so I went, up here, what'll I do? And that's when he said, that's it, I think we got it, do a few more. And I did a few more things, and he was like, oh, this is great. All right, as far as I'm concerned, he said, I think you're in. I have to run this by by the network, but hopefully they'll go with me. And so that's how it happened. Kind of a cool story, right?
Very much so. You're right, though. Even with that just one small line, you can really hear the New York Jackie Mason vibe to it, and then you had to reverse engineer it. That's amazing, though, since Courage doesn't sound all that different from your normal speaking voice. That just goes to show you how great the casting was on this show. Not just with you, when you look at all the other characters, they were all perfectly cast as well. I just love how mixed everyone is, but it somehow works. You're in the middle of this like Dust Bowl-esque setting where Eustace is this crotchety old semi-Western accent, which makes sense for the location. But then his wife is Scottish, and their dog has a New York accent. It shouldn't work, but somehow it does.
Yeah, it's great. It's all different. Yeah, it's great, actually, right?
Now, for my next question, I actually was really excited to get your take on this, and I was worried I wouldn't be able to get you on the show, so thankfully Jody was able to connect us.
When Jody contacted me and saying, John, me, and Stephen, I was thinking, he interviewed us, and I was thinking, where the hell was I? Why wasn't I contacted? Everybody got together, and I was, in retrospect, maybe Marty would be good. And then he said, no, he did it all separately, individually. And I go, oh, okay, then I don't feel bad anymore.
Yeah, I would have loved to have gotten you on all at once, but I just kept getting the previous guest to pass me along to somebody else. So there was no trying to actually leave you out. Actually, I even messaged you on Instagram beforehand, so if anything, you were the one ignoring me.
And what did you say on the message?
It was just a general introduction to me and my channel, nothing too special, and it probably didn't really help that it was an unprompted message as I sent it out before I got connected with John or David. I was just taking stabs in the dark, hoping to get at least one of you guys on, and luckily John passed me on to William, and David passed me on to Jody, and then Jody passed me on to you. So I have no idea who you're going to put me into contact with next.
Oh, so now I feel like I should send you on to somebody. I should actually.
Yeah, we're running out of major collaborators who were in the room for much of the series. So if my road ends here talking to Courage himself, that's a pretty great place to end.
As I say, if it's shit, you always have what we're doing right now, as opposed to before. But hey, good to see you, man.
Well, it's good seeing you too. I want to thank you for coming on. And like I said, this was a huge part of my childhood, and it's been great to talking to everyone and now to Courage.
Oh my God. Oh my God. What'll I do? What'll I do?
It's amazing. 20 plus years since the show ended, and you can still do that voice so easily. Well, of course, we know you could still do it because you did it only a few years ago in that Scooby-Doo crossover movie. But still, it's impressive how quickly you fall back into it.
Yeah, right. I did it 2 years ago, right? And I can still do it now. Right? Of course. I also probably like the answers to some of your questions. You might have gotten them from John Dilworth. It's possible, right?
Yes, that is correct. Though some of the questions are now going to be actually tailored to or in response to things that others have previously said. So it's actually good that we're doing yours at the end now.
Let me ask you a question. So what if you ask me a question and it's sort of a similar question as to something you might have asked John, and my answer is different? Then what do you do?
Well, I guess then I would just do my best Robert Stack from Unsolved Mysteries and say, John claims one thing, Marty claims the other. Where does the truth actually lie? Join us and we'll find out.
For instance, why after the first season did they cut back on Courage's words by about 90%? Why'd they do?
I actually have that question, and John's response when I asked him actually changed how I was going to ask you about it originally.
So listen, you're gonna broadcast what John said, right?
Yeah.
So it's no secret. I would be interested in hearing from you what he told you. Oh, and I love John. Let me just tell you what he told me. Obviously, you know what I was told, basically. But this doesn't matter. It doesn't matter that we're going out of order, does it?
No, that's fine. This actually was going to be my second question anyway, so we're not skipping around, actually.
You're going to be editing this anyway. Your head's going to explode, my friend. Your head's already exploding.
Marty, I'm fine. Do not worry.
All right. So here's the thing. So they loved, they were loving what I was doing with it. John had fallen in love with me and chose me over 300 other much more experienced voiceover artists because he liked the quality of my voice. He just felt I had something that just seemed to make sense for Courage. And he liked my eyebrows. John actually said that my eyebrows he was already leaning in the direction of me, but he looked at my eyebrows and he felt that they were a sign because it was like Courage's eyebrows. He told me that if you ask John, he will back this up. So anyway, that being said, they told me that they're going to cut back on the vocals for Courage, right? And I was like, as an actor, my ego was, not terribly happy, right? But and I was curious as to why. They said it had nothing to do with you, really. It had to do with basically some of the writing was, in a sense, by having him go, what'll I do? What'll I do? Or I'll save you, Muriel. Instead, he's just going to save Muriel. And that the things that people loved most were the screams. Ah! So you got that. You could put that at the beginning, put it to the end, wherever you want to put it, my friend. You like that? They love that. That's what they laughed most from. So they put it in front of what do they call? They said they gave it to these focus groups, and they didn't ask them if they thought Courage shouldn't talk. They just noticed that they were laughing more and responding more to some of those more action-oriented things that I'd be doing, right? And so they made a leap which said, well, let's just cut back because it slows things down. It's slowing things down. It's not that Marty's performance is a problem. It's just that the idea that there's so much going on that let's just cut back on that. And so it just be more streamlined. The irony of this is that I go to these conventions. I do a lot of conventions, right? And every convention, people are asking me to quote quotes of Courage, the things I do for love. I'll save you, Muriel, or I have a feeling something bad is going to happen. Things like that, right? They're all asking me for the words. These are the fans. These are the people that watch the goddamn show, may I say. So, and that actually love the show and continue to love it. The real diehard people, right? Someone like yourself, perhaps. So let me ask you a question. What do you think about the words?
Oh, they were the worst part of the show. It's a miracle you didn't get the show canceled. I kid. No, the interesting thing is that in preparation for these interviews, I watched the show from start to finish for the first time since the original airing, and it really goes to show you how reruns can mess with your perception of things. I'm sure as a little kid I did notice initially across season 1 Courage talked less and less, but as those reruns kicked into gear, I guess those early season 1 episodes mixed in with the later episodes and how much they reran the series, I'm sure they cycled through it pretty often. So I guess I just always assumed there was a lot more dialogue-heavy episodes just spread throughout the series. I suppose the fact that the bumpers often had Courage still talking might have also helped make it seem like he talked a lot more than he actually did.
Right.
So in my memory, Courage talked way more often than he actually did. I recall the reoccurring lines of, what'll I do, and the things I do for love, or I'll save you, Muriel, or the running joke of, if X is blank, then I'm Y.
And it's not, yeah.
Being in the majority of the episodes, or at least a large amount, versus being only in the first 8 episodes. So ultimately where I fall is, I get to an extent that the first 8 episodes are a little too dialogue heavy, especially since Courage is largely talking to himself in most cases, or talking to somebody who doesn't really respond, which I do see at times dragging those episodes pacing down and not really adding much. The one I think is the most egregious is actually Cajun Granny Stew, as the vast majority of the lines are really unneeded. Like, we don't need to hear him saying, oh, I gotta stop that fox, or, oh, there she is, and stuff like that. We get it from his distress that he's gotta save Muriel. We don't need to hear him saying it. That being said, I think they overcorrected a little too much here, and should have kept some lines, and maybe scaling it back by like 50% instead of the 95%.
Yes, exactly. So, but it doesn't matter because I'll tell you really honestly, it's not as if people who came in on season 2 loved Courage any the less.
Yeah, of course.
When they walked in on season 2 and never saw season 1, they were still enjoying the shit out of him. And whatever I was doing, I definitely did. I felt, to be honest with you, Andrew, I felt it was more of a challenge for me to keep the character, it wasn't, it still was very distinctive. And in its own way, it forced me to have to communicate without being too, overkill on the, precious about this. I was able to communicate without words and but just with sounds. And I think that's kind of a cool thing anyway. It was just the ego of me, but I think it also was that, and my ego. So who cares about my ego? At the bottom, and it wasn't personal. When I was doing a bad job. Actors have ridiculous egos. I try not to fancy myself someone who's not so much that, but back then it was my first cartoon, and this is, I was very excited to be a part of it. And so I was like, oh shit, they're cutting back on the words. It was a little tough for me to to deal with, but I got through it, and then I got excited. I go, Marty, you're getting paid to do this character. I had no idea that it would be this successful, by the way, or that so many people would love it and would look back upon it with a lot of emotions and stuff. So that's very, very cool for me to realize that, you know.
Yeah, I should say John did say that, but admitted that it was a lie since they didn't like your performance, but didn't have the heart to fire you. Yeah, John said basically the same story behind it as you did. Word from up top and focus groups and all that stuff. I also wonder if potentially that this being the era that Cartoon Network was airing like 4 hours of Scooby-Doo a day, if the higher ups cynically wanted to differentiate one scared talking cartoon dog from the other scared cartoon talking dog, and Scooby-Doo won. If that was a consideration, they eventually got over it for the crossover movie.
Yeah.
But to me, it feels like it could have also been a reason too.
But you know what's also very funny about that movie? That movie, because John was not involved in it, and you know, I think that was by his design, or that he didn't agree with, he didn't like this is what I got from him. And listen, he's a real artist. I mean, John is an artist. He's not a pompous, or, you know, like celebrity type. I'm so important. He's an artist. He's got a lot of love. He does it for love of the game. He made a lot of money, I'm sure, off this damn thing, but it sounds to me like he'll turn down money if it doesn't quite hit him the right way. And so I have a lot of respect for John and what he does with that. And I think he didn't like the crossover idea. He doesn't think that two universes should be together. This is what he said in this one thing we did, this little mini reunion. I know we're all over the place. This is probably not how you wanted to do this thing.
No, it's fine. Like I said, this is an embarrassment of riches. I'll have a lot of cool stuff to work with for the final product.
So we did, you know, John and I appeared along with Thea and Paul Scheffler in, you know, in this Galaxy Con. So when we did this thing, and it was, you know, it was really exciting because it turned out to be the only time, because Thea died, and so saddened by that, devastated by that. What a wonderful lady she was, and terrific character she created. And but we were all there together, and it was me, John, and Paul and Thea, and it was just like, what a fun thing. And he said in that, when the talk of the Scooby-Doo movie, he knew we had said yes. Thea and I both did it. How wonderful was that she got to do Courage one last time, right? As that turned out. John said that, well, you know, God bless, but I personally feel as if, and he kind of said it in a low-key way, not in an all, you know, nasty way, but he said, like, you know, I think that, you know, something like crossovers, or he didn't say crossover. He said, I feel like when you're bringing two universes together, you're watering things down. I think the one universe is the purity of Courage in Courage's universe is fine with me. That was his point of view. That being said, how excited I was that this movie took place in Courage's universe, pretty much. The Scooby-Doo people visited his universe. So they kept a lot of the essence of, right, of you know, Courage's life. And yes, there were certain things that had to be somewhat watered down just a little bit, but I think they were pretty damn good, with considering that it was a crossover. I think they pretty much honored Courage beautifully in that movie. And well, I don't want, if anybody hasn't seen it, then I don't want to give it away, but I will tell you that in the wrap up, Courage figures extraordinarily importantly in the climax of the film. Let's put it that way, without saying anything. I don't want to give it away. But what I love personally about that, going back to our previous conversation, John wasn't involved in it. The people there that were, you know, worked with me on it, and they actually did put words. Courage did have about, it was more like the way you suggested maybe it should have been done 50% less than it had been in the early phrases, but still having him say lines sometimes here and there sprinkled throughout. And that is how the movie was done. I was tickled from that personally, between you and me and anybody else who's listening to this lovely podcast.
Exactly. Now, I don't particularly like how John, David, and William were not asked back, and I do have a lot of issues with the story elements and the writing behind it, but I'll say Jody and Andy's music is still fantastic as always, and yours and Thea's performances were just as good as they were in the original series. Which, like I said earlier, I'm always impressed when a voice actor can just easily step back into their roles literal decades later at this point. I mean, the show ended in 2003, so it was damn near 20 years removed, and you fell so easily back into it.
I had still done a few, like there was still like these promo spots that went in 2004 and 2005, and so I still came in every once in a while to promote the reruns and things like that. And so occasionally, but yes, certainly after 2005, nothing at all. But I guess that's where the convention world comes in. I only started doing that actually 6 years ago. So that I have to kind of do this. I gotta go all the things I do for love. Yeah, I have to do that. So I've been working on that for the last 6 years. So I think it kind of helped me probably with the movie.
Gotta warm up the vocal cords somehow.
Yeah.
Now, like I said, it's crazy to me that with how major the line, "the things I do for love," seems to be with the fans and references to the show, I would have thought that would have been the exception to the no talking rule and been featured a lot more throughout the series instead of just the first few episodes of season 1. Again, it really shows you how often they reran those episodes. It really built up in our minds as being a much larger part of the show. Now, obviously, the majority of the rest of the series is just largely interchangeable screams, yammering, laughing, etc. So, would you go in and record each and every one of those lines every single time? Or did they eventually just build up a library to use from, and as the series went on, you went in less and less?
Once in a while, they would say we got it in the library, once in a while. But they would have me do it every time. And I'm glad they did, actually. Because I wanted to, I feel like, because they always felt that maybe I would come up with something. And sometimes the scream itself would have a crack somewhere in the middle of it that would be just different. It wasn't all like so that it would be fresh. And yes, they didn't make me do every single scream, but every single time I did record, I screamed at least once. And I never didn't scream in a recording session. Always I did. The same thing with the babbling, because you never know. And also sometimes with the babbling, it would include actual occasional words within the babble that would pop up, or specific sound like or whatever it might be would come as he's trying to explain, and then all these little visual images would come up as I was doing that. So they would need that to be very kind of specific. And so, yeah, it was pretty much every time.
Well, that's good to hear. There was a cynical part of me that thought Cartoon Network would use the fact that your performances were often very similar to try and cut down costs by making episodes out of archival recordings.
Well, they didn't have to save. In other words, they still had to bring me in. In other words, it was still a recording session. In other words, if they used me for an episode and they used other recordings and didn't have me come in at all for that one session, they would still have to pay me for that session, because whatever was assembled was my voice. So they couldn't pull that. I mean, not that they were trying to, but I'm saying the SAG rules would not allow that to happen anyway. Just in your thoughts, in your cynical, how old are you, Andrew?
28.
28. You're always you're already so damn cynical. God damn. Good to have a little cynicism in this world. You seem upbeat though. You're a very upbeat guy though.
I usually am, but I also do know how terrible the industry can be. So I was hoping your situation was like what it was, but I wouldn't have been surprised if it wasn't either. Now, my next question actually is related to all the screaming and yammering. So, how specific was the direction you were given? Was it hyper specific with the description of what you were seeing and being instructed exactly how to scream and react? Or was it much more like in The Simpsons with Homer's catchphrase of dough just being listed as annoyed grunt in the script and Dan Castellaneta being given free range to just come up with that?
I'm going to go back to you. What do you think? I'm going to answer you, but I'm just curious. What would you suspect based on what you saw?
I assume there was always a base level of instructions of what was on the screen and general level of what they were looking for, but they allowed you to run wild with it and reined you in if they felt they needed it to be specific.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, the thing is, the very thing that, to his credit, he took a shot with me. He didn't know if I would hold. How did he know I would hold up down the line? Probably maybe a suspicion from my audition that I was talented and energetic, and he probably had a suspicion, but he could have gone with proven voice actors that were proven to have done this sort of thing, and he didn't go for them because he went with thinking out of the box a little bit. That's what I think was kind of cool. So essentially, it's what is the old expression, when the teacher is ready, the student will come, or is it the other way around? The student is ready, the teacher will come. I think it's the second. Whatever it is, the point is, John needed me to, help him, realize this. Yes, he knew he had it in his mind, and he can only explain it so much because he can't, have me be in his mind. But what he did was, mostly John did not direct me most of the time. Once here and there, he would direct me. He'd be in the booth and directing me, but most of the time, about 75-80% of the time, I was being directed by Peter Fernandez, who was the vocal director of the show, and he was the main guy, and John and him met and had numerous discussions of the kinds of things he was looking for, but even Peter was like, what do you got, Marty? Sometimes it would be like, what do you got? And mostly they were happy with it. They were pleased, and John was tickled, and everybody was tickled about it. But ultimately it was like, really, it truly was. Once it was established and they liked it, then it was smart enough to know that pretty much this is what it is. And then they now know, okay, when he's they knew, like, they didn't need to work on that. Like, that was already, Marty had it at will. He could do that. So they'll just say, yeah, give me some of that courage babble. And I knew what it means, or how long. Make it a little longer. Good. That's great. I think we got, then it was just really, sometimes these things would go really fast because it was like, there's a lot to do. You want to get this stuff recorded, because the real hard part of the animation animation stuff is, has to be done,
Now, on the same line of dealing with the recordings, William had actually mentioned that the reason the original voice of Eustace, Lionel Wilson, retired was not due to his age or his health, but due to the promo department being a lot more demanding in their sessions compared to the actual series recordings. Basically, what he said was the promo department would utilize the entire record session, regardless if they got it in 1 or 2 takes, versus when you were doing the series, if you got it in 1 or 2 takes, you moved on. So does that mirror your own experience working with the promo department?
Well, first of all, let me respond to what you just said. And you said we're going to learn things. I did not know what you just said. I did not know that Lionel retired from the role. I thought he died, and that's why he couldn't do the role anymore. And so Arthur Anderson took the role. Didn't Lionel die?
It's a little complicated. From what I can tell, he did die after he retired, but it was in between production seasons. So whether he decided to retire or not, it wouldn't have ultimately mattered.
Did not know that at all. Wow. Oh, man. I did not know that. So the answer to, did I have any problems? I didn't give why. I was tickled to be doing this kind of work. Listen, how old was I? I was like, let's say, in my 40s, it was, and he was in his 80s. For him, I guess he felt it was overkill. For me, I was tickled that there were going to be commercials, like that I was going to be doing these commercials. I didn't care. I got paid. In my mind, I got paid well. And I knew I was getting all these, first of all, the second season was the most profitable season for me ever as an actor, because not only was I getting all of my money that I was being paid for those recording sessions, but I was also getting all the first season residuals. So I was getting, and those are high residuals. The first early few years of residuals, you're getting a lot of money. Then it goes down and down and down to what it is now, and it stays right at this, deathly low level. But still, I get money. I mean, I get a few thousand a year from Courage. Getting $6.76 for each cartoon. But it was like, so me, I was like, sure, you need me, you want to use me. So I was just feeling like I'm doing fine. What do I care? I didn't care at all. I had a totally different experience. And anytime I went in, anytime I record, oh, by the way, sometimes they would have me come in and I would be getting a separate recording session fee for the promotions. They would bring me in and have me in, and I would get paid for those. I would get paid for that, for session fees. So I don't know what he's talking. I mean, I don't know what he's talking about. Especially what that would make him retire. And what was he worried that between you off the record? You don't have to bring it, because I didn't know the guy that well. He seemed like a very nice guy. You're in your 80s. You're being asked to do what do you mean it's too much for a guy my age? Too much to do what? Say a few lines into a microphone? What the hell? You're not jumping out of a moving car. I mean, and why would you leave I'm shocked from this. Why would you leave the show? You're in your 80s. You're still working as an actor. You're still getting the work. Who do you care? More work. He wasn't a superstar. He wasn't Tom Hanks. So, and you're in your 80s. How many more years you got left? God willing, a lot. But, I would say just keep working. Why would he leave? I'm blown away. You don't have to, whatever you want to do with my response. I don't care if you put that in or not. That's crazy. This is the interesting thing about that you're recording each one of us separately. As far as, I don't know what he's talking about once again, because I sometimes had to do 10 takes. Usually it was 2 or 3 takes. Sometimes it was 1 take. More often than not, it was 2 or 3. Occasionally, it would be many takes on the same line over and over again. Of you know what? Try it again this way, or try it again that way. A matter of fact, I have a story that seems to rebut that. It was a moment when Courage, I don't know what the episode was, but he pops his head up out of the ground, pops out of this lush forest with trees around. It's kind of ominous looking, and his head is popped out of the ground, and he goes like this. He's looking around, and he goes, and all he's supposed to go is right, something like that, right. So I remember Peter saying, okay, so you're kind of a little bit confused but also anxious. So I go, Go, no, you're confused, but I don't hear anxious. I need anxious. No. The too many. First of all, just 1 syllable. You're doing it like, you're doing it like 2 syllables. Just do 1 syllable. And then we said, and then at one point I go, and they go, no, see, you're losing courage. Now we're losing courage. We need to bring it back up. We're losing courage. This went on. I swear I did about 20 takes on that thing. 20 takes on, and at the end they said, I think we got it. Either way, I'm sure we have it in the library anyway. So, so anyway, I don't know what Lionel's talking about. I swear to God, 20 takes on one word. Mostly we get it because we know what we're doing. It's not as if it's deliberately set up in those recording sessions that it's understood that 2, 3 takes, maybe a fourth. No, it's not understood at all. Nobody understood any of that. You get it, we move on. If they need more from you, you're being paid. That you got to give them what they want. That's my thinking. Anyway, crazy.
That's interesting. I also wonder if it comes down to being a combination of the difference in ages between you guys and the difference in the size of roles and what those roles were. To start off with, yes, he was 30 years older than you, so that's easy to see it as being more tiring to him than to you. And two, he was a supporting character who had actual lines, so it might have been easier for him to be zeroed in on how to say, "Stupid dog, you made me look bad," compared to the more confusing and sometimes nuanced directions you had to be given for your screams and whatnot. Unfortunately, we'll never know. Add you're the main character and he's the supporting character. It's probably a little easier for him to zero in on the handful of lines of "Stupid dog, you made me look bad," versus the more confusing and nuanced directions you were given being in the entirety of the episode.
Unfortunately, we can't ask the guy himself. I wish we could. And Thea would have had her own special uptake on the whole thing. God bless her. What a funny lady she was. What a terrific, funny lady. When you see Muriel, that is Thea, except that Thea's darker, a little darker than Muriel. But her warmth, her love, she, totally, that was Thea,
Yeah, she seems so sweet and grandmotherly and, just the real deal. I love seeing her at that convention that you guys did a few years back prior to her death.
Yeah, wasn't that nice to see that? Wasn't that cool to see us together? Wasn't it cool, Andrew? Wasn't it cool?
That is so cool hearing Courage say my name. Though usually Courage saying my name means something bad is about to happen, so I think I need to look around. Now, my next question for you is, obviously, when this was being made, you were not the target audience for the show. And while I think adults can certainly get enjoyment out of it, I do wonder, did you ever sit down and actually watch the show?
I had to watch it. My neurosis wouldn't allow me not to. Where some other people go the other way, their neurosis, like Robert De Niro's neurosis, is that he didn't like watching himself on screen. It's Robert De Niro. I say that's ridiculous. Why wouldn't you want to get the pleasure out of watching? And you can't watch it as an actor. You can't watch yourself when you're on stage unless somebody tapes this, the session. You're still not quite getting it correctly unless, because there's nothing like being in a theater and, seeing a live performance. But, on screen, you could see your performance and you could learn. See, for me, I like to see it because I like to learn from what I did. And, I'm pretty accurate in my assessment of myself. I'm pretty hard on myself generally. And I go, ooh, no good. When I do live, and mostly, so much of any of the work I've done is generally live theater. It's definitely on camera or, independent films and things like that. And, television shows and character work and on stage. And generally speaking, I've definitely, anyway, what was I saying? But I like to learn from watching myself.
Now, obviously, the show was doing well enough to get multiple seasons, so that was a pretty easy indicator that it was popular. But did you know how big of a hit it was compared to other shows on Cartoon Network or other kids' shows in general? Or did you discover that years later at the conventions?
Really, it was the conventions. Not that I knew it was successful because it went 4 seasons. And I know that when I would run into people and I would say I did it, I would hear some inklings of, oh my God, really? And I was saying, oh, wow, they really loved it. I'd hear it. But at conventions, it's just like you see all these people that are, and sometimes they're lined up, which is really if it's a big convention, sometimes I'll get like lines and stuff, so that's like, oh my God, how wonderful that is. I never tire of that. That's, forget about that. It's there's the financial remuneration of it, the pleasure of seeing people, and that I made, my performance of this wonderful character that was supplied to me by John Dilworth and all the people that created that show and made it such a wonderful show, that somehow me bringing that character to life, made a difference in people's lives. That makes me really happy, and just, in general, going beyond the finances.
Now, are there any particular episodes or moments or performances that stand out to you as being memorable or favorites to you?
Interesting. I mean, if you, I just listened to that question, and the only thing that comes to mind that really, in terms of pride, I mean, I think pride was in that very first episode, to walk into that, that booth for the first time with a water bottle and a music stand and storyboard right here, microphone here, vocal script here, and saying, okay, so we're going to go one at a time, line by line. And I remember the first few lines, we would go through it, or what it would be, and I would do it, and then I'd hear, okay, I think we got it. Let's go to the next. When I would hear that, I'd be thinking, oh my God, this is, not only am I doing this, but they're really liking what I'm doing. Like, so much so that we don't have to spend a lot of time. Like, I think we got it. That for me was, and they really rolled good in the first episode. We had other episodes where it took longer. It was a little bit more, rugged, but for that alone, is a memory that I'll always, have. Which is why when people say my favorite episode, I have to tell them the Shadow of Courage is my favorite episode personally, though I would have to throw in the King Ramses Curse and Freaky Fred and the Hunchback of Nowhere. I'd have to throw those in, those three very different, all of them, right? But, as far as creativity goes,
Now that segues into my next question. Rewatching the series as a whole, I'm realizing, despite the shows being remembered as mostly just the creepy and scary cartoon, which, in fairness, the majority of the episodes do fall into that category, there were a lot of sweet and tear-jerking episodes.
yes.
Like Remembrance of Courage Past, or The Mask, or Last of the Star Makers, Perfect, the Hunchback episode, and so on. Do you think it's unfair that the show is mostly just remembered for the creepy and scary episodes, and the more sweeter and emotional ones tend to be overlooked?
I think it's actually very good for it to be known as being a scary show, because it gives it that edge. And you need an edge anyway for posterity to kick in, I think, for real posterity to kick in. So the idea that, that it's scary, it's this wonderful cartoon with this little pink dog jumping up and down in the middle of nowhere. And the music is and God bless Jody Grafe and Andy Ezra for the music they did, very upbeat. And then they would make it scary sounding sometimes, right? But I think the scary part, let that be what brings people in, and then let them be pleasantly surprised with the Hunchback of Nowhere, not looking for, sometimes it's hard, but like, oh, shoot, this was unconventional, to keeping people guessing. But, to bring people in, I think what kept it alive as much as it did, was that it was more, scary. And that even, Scooby, it's an empire. I mean, Scooby-Doo, but Scooby, they always wore costumes, right? All of the scary things were costumes, people in costumes, whereas Courage's monsters were real. So I kind of dug that. So it was a little bit more like not only for kids, kind of a little bit more. With Scooby-Doo was more mainly for kids, really, mostly, And then people look back on it and they get a kick out of it because they remember, Whereas I think, I mean, there are people that can watch Courage, not kids, that could get a kick out of it. I think, like Bugs Bunny a little bit in that respect,
Now, wrapping up, we're nearly a quarter century removed from the premiere of the show. What do you feel the legacy of the show is, and how do you feel about the diehard fans still loving it all these years later?
Well, here's really what I say about it. I am, again, the conventions really solidified this with me because I have people that sometimes come up to me in the conventions and they're like looking at me like that. And then I also hug people, after we, say goodbye. I'm big on that if they want a hug, and I've had people cry when they see me, like literally break down in tears. And sometimes, I used to watch this with my grandmother, and these were moments when we were together, and or you were my childhood. You got me through my childhood. And I realized that a lot of people that come to these conventions are people that are a little bit, kind of off the beaten track, so to speak. Not only, but I'm saying a very high percentage of people that, when they talk about nerds, or people speak about, what a nerd is, which has become this, like badge of honor, actually, in today's world, as I am a nerd kind of thing. But, people that are, that have had troubles, that have struggled in their lives, that have had pain in their childhood and difficulties and deep sadness and fears, anxieties, tremendous. It's so big, anxiety in the world we live in today, especially the world we live in today. And so for young people, anxiety is a very real thing. So when they see this little dog who's so, scared of everything, so terrified of everything, somehow on the 11th hour pulls it together to face his fears and, basically save those he loves and perhaps save the world on some level. So there's a wonderful, inherent message to this whole show, which is, face your fears. We understand we all have them. And fear and anxiety is, we know you have them. But it's like, if courage can do it, you can do it, kind of thing. And I think, at the risk of sounding too precious, I think there was absolutely truth to that a lot of people really did. Some of these people felt good about the fact they felt it resonated with them. This idea of their own anxieties and perhaps having been abused, or, sadness and terror and whatever it is, and that somehow courage comforted them, and that you too can be a hero. You are a hero. It's a great message, that I was so fortunate to be a part of, that, yeah, I mean, I created the voice. Yes, wonderful. I helped breathe life into this character and it reached people. But ultimately, it was this just wonderful spirit that it just exists in the show that I think is timeless. And I think it'll always be appreciated because of that. It'll never go out of style, that message, right?
Oh, I completely agree, and that's a sentiment all the other guests who have worked on the show have said as well in their interviews. The show had such a broad appeal across the demographics, not just between the scary and more emotional episodes, but also crosses age boundaries as well. This is a show that an adult watching it by themselves will like it just as much as a parent watching it with their child or the kid themselves watching it. David mentioned that his kid and Sigourney Weaver's kid were classmates, and one day she actually approached him to tell him how much she loved the show and loved watching it with her kid.
Wow.
So David is like, wow, I never thought Ripley would be praising my work.
Yeah.
There aren't that many shows out there that are typically aimed at children but have such a wide appeal and stay relevant all these years later, and I think Courage will for sure stand the test of time and will be passed on from one generation to the other. Well, I think that's a good note to end on. Marty, I just want to thank you for stopping by again. This has been fantastic getting to talk to the man behind the voice and screams of Courage and learn what made that little pink dog tick.
Hey, listen, man, it's been a pleasure talking to you. You obviously know your stuff about Courage. I've been interviewed on numerous podcasts by people. You are by far the guy that seems to know the most about stuff So anyway, I've enjoyed talking to you. This has been terrific. Let's do it again sometime.
Well, thank you for saying that, Marty. I really appreciate hearing that. I should also say, if you want to hear Courage yell your name like I've gotten the privilege to hear, make sure to check out Marty on Cameo. The link will be in the description.
Oh, direct people to the Cameo, and also my pages, Facebook and Instagram.
Those links will also be in the description. Well, again, thank you, Marty, for stopping by today. I'm sure all the people listening and watching really enjoyed this.
Take care, everybody.
Now, a note from the future. The exciting thing I have to say before this episode is over that this is just part of a much larger look at Courage the Cowardly Dog. So check out the link in the description for a massive 3-part retrospective on the series featuring interviews with fellow Courage alums including series creator John R. Dilworth, head writer David Stephen Cohen, staff writer William Hohauser, and musical composer Jody Gray, all live right now on the channel. Also live right now is the full interviews with them as well, so check those out as well. Until next time, I'm Andrew Wass, and I hope you enjoyed your time with us.